Good morning, everybody. Boy, it's a discipline for me. Watched the news yesterday. I made 2 videos yesterday. The last 2 videos you saw, I made them all in the same day because, I was just, took a ride, and then I watched the news. And I was, oh, Lord, let me not make another video out of anger. I'm going to cover a little bit. I don't know what we'll title this. Maybe we'll title this After the Worst Mass Shooting in the Nation's History, which targeted homosexual people. The worst mass shooting in the history of the United States of America, which targeted gays in a Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. The media. There is one presidential candidate, listen, in the history of the world, since we have been a nation, there's one ever that has taken millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars from people who execute homosexuals. Just, if it was even possible for people to understand it, but Hillary Clinton is the one candidate ever. Say, how could that be, John? President Obama, he did not take the money from people who murder homosexuals. Ronald Reagan did not take the money from people who murdered homosexuals. Are you crazy? No. Money from people whose law is, if you are gay and you engage in gay sex, which I do not approve of, we will execute you. We will murder you by law. We will kill you. Okay. We know that goes on in countries, John, that practice Sharia law, which is correct. And we, as a society, do not agree with it. That is correct. But we can only do so much. That is correct. But in the worst mass shooting in the history of the country, which specifically targeted homosexuals, there just happens to be a candidate for president by the name of Hillary Clinton who has taken more money from people who execute gays than any other candidate or presidential contender in the history of the Republic. Well, John, you think maybe that would be some question that the media might bring up. Now, and she took it from Saudi Arabia and also Qatar and multiple ones. How, John, what do you mean she took more money than any other? I mean what I just said. Because she has a foundation which is like a corrupt foundation, because that foundation is supposed to be non-profit and do charitable things, but they did an investigation, not conservatives, but a mainline news thing, did investigation, and only 1% of that money was accounted for. And millions came from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the countries who, if we catch you as a homosexual, we murder you. That's what those countries do. Now, when I watched the news last night, of course they did not only not bring that up, but one news media organization blamed it on Christian preaching. In the mix of the panic and the fear and all of that, one mainline one, I think it was CBS. I'll talk about Scott Kelly in a minute, then I'll teach. They were having a discussion. What causes such rage? Now, I just explained to you. Their radical beliefs, not even the radical Islamicists, just regular Sharia law. Those who reject ISIS, but who are Muslim and under Sharia law, that's not radical belief. That's an actual belief for those who practice that. that you could call that moderate Muslim countries, also believe and practice the execution of homosexual people. So as I watched CBS, I believe it was, there was a host said, and what causes such outrage towards homosexuals that could cause this Muslim man that just killed him? And they played a video YouTube clip on the news, world news, of a Christian preacher, Hispanic by the way, preaching against homosexuality. Now, how you could make a connection like that at a time of real tragedy and incite anger towards the Christian church. So in order for us as the public to believe what you just showed, which is highly inflammatory because of what's going on in the nation, and to think that a Muslim radical who part of his belief system is anti-Christian, okay, and to think that he was influenced by a Christian pastor, that's what they put out there. Now, as Scott Pelley, the guy who does CBS News, World News on CBS, as he interviewed one of the gay survivors from the Pulse nightclub, a black man, I myself saw that Scott Pelley, when he first was reporting on this massacre in Orlando, I myself saw how he was politically incorrect in the way he was speaking about gay people. I myself saw that. Oh, by the way, I helped more gay people over the years than most liberals helped. I've already explained that to you people. And I love it when liberals say, we're so for the gay community, and you lift not one finger. You say, I explained that to you. I've taken many of my friends who were gay to help them. And many, many times, because they're part of the street people that I've helped. And I've never once discriminated against a single one of them. And so I see the smug liberals on TV talk about how they're so, and Mr. Pelley is so ignorant, the newsman, because the first night I picked it up after the Pulse massacre, he kept saying a shooting in a gay nightclub, a shooting in a gay nightclub, a shooting in a gay, and I kept thinking, they don't want to be referred to that way. I know enough to and I said that to myself. I said, you're referring to them. They want to be known as people. I'm not justifying it, but they want to be known as people. The next night, which was last night, he videotaped the survivor, which was a black man. And I noticed when Scott Pelley began the news that night, no longer was he referring to it as a gay nightclub. And I thought to myself, I picked it up. I said, somebody finally told him, that's derogatory the way you're speaking, Mr. Pelley. And then sure enough, they did the interview he did with one of the black survivors. And that's exactly what he said. He said, this wasn't a gay nightclub. This wasn't an attack against gays. He said, this wasn't that. That's derogatory. Mr. Liberal had to learn the lesson that even I knew. And he said, this was an attack on people. I like what that young black gay person actually said. He said, this isn't about a hate crime. The black survivor from the Pulse nightclub, he said, this wasn't about targeting gays. Now, it was actually, but what he was saying, one of the survivors, he said, just the act of shooting humans like that, which was correct, that act itself is what is wrong. And I was just so mad to not only see what I just told you. There has never been a candidate, a presidential candidate, who has taken more money right now from countries who execute gay people on the spot, and has taken more money, millions and millions and millions. There has never been one, because she has established a foundation called the Clinton Foundation. A book was written about it called Clinton Cash. And for you in the media to not even question, Mr. Trump, you have taken more millions from countries who execute gays on the spot. You're running for president, the worst mass murder in the history of the United States, which is killing 50 gay people. Mr. Trump, how could you possibly? That's what they would say. And so, Mr. Pelley, and all you news organizations, President Obama went on the news right after I spoke about how all of those who continue to speak about what Donald Trump said about the wall, I don't agree with the wall. But now he clearly stated the other day, this is not a ban on all Muslims. He said, what I want to do is get control of our immigration, which is true, because our immigration system, this is acknowledged by the Obama administration, is insufficient at the present time to weed out possible radicals. And I'm not anti-immigrant. And after he gave that speech, he made it very clear. President Obama comes out in response to Trump and says, how could you ban an entire religion? President Obama, you're inciting violence there by doing that. Why? Because there are many Muslims in the country who believe that the other candidate is wanting to ban all Muslims from this country. And you can't keep saying that. What you have to say is, my course on Islam that I taught, I had a Muslim come to the fire department back in the 1990s. Now, this was after 9/11, and that firehouse in Kingsville, stationed by A&M University. It used to be called A&I University on Armstrong. And we just, this was after 9/11, but this was before there was certain threat level about ambulances or fire trucks. They sent a memo to the fire departments across the country at this time to be careful, because there's some chatter, some knowledge that it's possible Muslim radicals might try to just get an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car and use it and run into, something. Because back in the early days, that was quite easy to do. And some people have done things like that, just stealing ambulances over the years. Because they're parked, you go in the house, you're at a scene. So, but that memorandum was not yet sent to us, because we did have one sent to us from the government. It went to all fire departments across the United States to be aware of that threat. But we didn't get that memo yet. It wasn't sent out yet. At this time, I'm going to tell you the story. And at the university where the firehouse is located, almost right on the campus, there was a Muslim man dressed in the full Muslim garb, just happened to be walking around the little fire station, looking. And the way that little firehouse was set up, you might not think anybody could see you or anybody's there, because we had a little room and we just looked through a screen door, and it was inside our little dorm. And he's just walking around. Now, we've had people walk around before, but it did look suspicious. And my captain, Royale, said, hey, as a joke, he says, there's some guy walking around in a dress out there. Go check him out, John. So I went out nicely. And he didn't looked a little suspicious in a sense, but I said, yes, can I help you? And this is what he told me. True story. He said, I'm doing a school report about fire trucks and ambulances and things of that nature. That didn't sound true to me. And so I'm just looking, you're at a university, that might be something a high school kid would do, not at a university. And so I talked to him. And I remember, I said, well, I'm a Christian. And as we started talking, He said, you in the United States, in the Western world, he said, all of the stuff you see, the pornography, the alcoholism, you pump pornography into Muslim countries, which we do. We are nonstop number one producer of porn, sending it out online. It comes all from the majority of it, it's what, 97% is produced, majority in California. Many nations don't want that. And we say it's an expression of free speech to have an 18-year-old girl having sex with a 60-year-old man on video. In many nations, that's a crime. And in our nation, we pump that. But yet then if you have one day under whatever the legal age is, 18 or 17, if you have one day under and it's on video, you go to prison because that's child pornography, which I agree is wrong. But yet we bring people right to the edge. Because we say, oh, she just turned whatever, 18 or 17, I don't know what she just turned 18. Pump it out. Pump that girl having sex with a 60-year-old man. Pump it, because we produce it in this country, and we send it all over the earth. And many countries try to block it, and they get through. But yet, we also, one day under the 18, we have people all through this country, online, cops, trying to, I'm a girl, oh, you're going to prison. We lead people right to the edge. It should all be illegal. Because Scripture says to look upon a woman and lust after her. Now, this Muslim man himself said, that's so schizophrenic. How could you be a Christian country and be doing this? The man I was discussing this with at the firehouse. I said, no, I said, I agree with you. I said, but many in our country who claim the name Christian, they don't really, it's just like a title. But many in the Muslim world don't see that, okay? Then as I talked to him, he, I'm sure, didn't think I was like a preacher or could teach or whatever, probably a fireman. My hair was a little long, not as long as now. So I said, but brother, and I talked to him nicely. I said, I used to preach to some Muslims up at the jail, which was true. I remember that because he was a student. There was a student many years ago that got in trouble in that town of Kingsville, and he was a Muslim background. So I used to go to the jails. When I never forget, I'd go up, and because he asked me, can you get me a Bible in the Persian language? I said, I will, brother. And then I ordered it. Took me like a month to get it, and one day when I got it, I went back on Sunday to the jail. He was so happy. It was printed I couldn't read it, but it was in Persian. He couldn't believe I did that. I said, it's nothing, brother. I paid 10 for it. Just that gesture, though, that I went home, made the little list, said, okay, part of my routine, I got to get the Bible. So I spoke. That was a man in jail that I actually bought a Persian Bible for because he wanted one. So as I'm talking to this Muslim man at the firehouse, I told him the story of Christianity and Islam. It might fit. I didn't even know what verse I was going to use today. And then I thought I'll talk about one of the Psalms. I just thought, now, this is in that Psalm. And it wasn't planned. Talking about the princes of Abraham. Okay, in case I forget. I pray out here for the princes. I pray for Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Now, I explained to this Muslim man that was at the firehouse the history of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I sat there for about 15 minutes. I said, well, Christians and Muslims and Jews, I said, they have things in common. I said, because in Scripture, in the Old Testament, Abraham, God says in the New Testament that Abraham would be the father of many nations. And that refers to really the redemption that comes in Jesus, that all people groups could be redeemed to God through Jesus Christ. That's the fulfillment we read about in Galatians. But without going too much now, I told this Muslim man walking in the firehouse, it said, and Abraham had a son. And God promised Abraham in the book of Genesis. He said, if you follow me by faith, Abraham, I will make of you a great nation. I said, this is true history. It took place many years before the time of Jesus Christ, the story of Abraham. It said, and Abraham went on a journey. And the Bible in Hebrews 11 says, and Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. But this was just God that spoke to him. Understand, was that John the Christian God? Of course it was the Christian God. But you didn't have Christianity yet. Listen to me. It's the one true God. Yes, the God of the Christians. But the one true God who manifested himself to a pagan man by the name of Abraham. And he said, and if you follow me, Abraham, Genesis 15 and Genesis 12, you read it. God said to this man, I'll make of you this great nation of people, Abraham. Now I'm teaching this to this Muslim guy walking in the firehouse back in the 1990s. And he's listening to me. And I'm thinking he knows all this. And then as I taught it, I'll do a little more here than there, but I did it just like this. I said, so then, as time progressed, Abraham, he did go on that journey that God said, go on this journey. Go live somewhere where you're a stranger. You're a stranger. And he's in the land. But he's not having the promise. Where's my kids? My wife's not getting pregnant. Sarah, we're getting older. Sarah's not getting pregnant. And he comes up with a couple of schemes. More than one, but I'll just tell the important one. And they decide that Sarah's not getting pregnant. So Abraham will sleep with the maid, which was something they did back then, sort of a surrogate mother. Okay? And he sleeps with a woman by the name of Hagar. Now I'm telling the history of Islam, in a sense, to this Muslim man. Not knowing if he knows any of this. He said, listen, I know this man had different motives, because I'll tell you at the end. But right now, at the time I'm talking to him, I didn't know that. So he's listening. I said, and when he has a child from this maid called Hagar, that child's name is Ishmael. And I said, and Ishmael, this actual son from Father Abraham, is really traced as the father. Muslims trace their roots all the way back to him as a heritage of ethnicity. Now, I don't think he knew that, this Muslim guy, okay? Because I know, as I talked, he was learning. He didn't know a lot of this. I said, so this son Ishmael that Abraham had, and God promised, I said, but he had it through the maid. Abraham didn't have it through his wife Sarah. But Abraham loved this boy, who the Muslim people traced their roots to him, to this son. And Abraham loved him. And the son was about 12 years of age. And Abraham thought, this is the promise. Thank you, God, so much for this son. He's a good boy. And God appears to them, Abraham and Sarah, and says, no, Sarah's going to have a son. I made the promise. It's a promised seed. It's going to be a son that's born in a way that people thought you were too old and Sarah's too old, so it would fit the type and the symbol of Jesus. You understand this? Who was born of a virgin, a birth that would not take place in a normal way unless there was an intervention, which there was, and the Virgin Mary had Christ. The Holy Spirit came upon her and she conceived. So, in a way, it's not a virgin birth, but God was telling Abraham and Sarah, no, I'm going to do it, even though she was about 90, and Abraham was about 100, when God had said, no, it's not Ishmael. It's going to be a son from Sarah. She gets pregnant and has Isaac. Now, Isaac is the promised son. Isaac will then later have a son by the name of Jacob. And Jacob has the 12 tribes. Okay, his name is changed to Israel. And in essence, the Jewish nation comes from that line in natural ethnicity. But what about that other son, who the Muslim people trace their roots to? This other son of Abraham. It was he a son that God said is so wicked and disastrous. What happened was, in the story, Abraham wanted that son, Ishmael, to be the one. He said to God, no, let Ishmael live before thee. I've invested 12 years in this son. I love this boy. The father of the Muslim people, who they trace their heritage, okay? I understand the difference, okay? I can't do it all. I understand Islam is a religious movement, but the ethnicity, the majority of Muslims' ethnicity, traces back to that, okay? They understand it. That's what I was teaching this man. And so God said to Abraham, I know you love Ishmael, and I too will make a great nation out of him. And you know, Bible scholars, because there's a real promise in there that God says. It's kind of, it goes a little bit in depth, princess and scholars don't really deal that well with that, to be honest with you. They say, well, it was kind of, no, God fulfilled it in a way that it would be important for Christians to understand. That God said, I'm still going to speak into the community of that child. I'm still going to do it. And maybe it will not look like the culture of Christianity that's going to rise to the promised seed. And surely the promised seed that comes, who is Jesus Christ, is the Redeemer of all nations. But at least understand that God also said, not another way to God, the only way is through the Son, but what God said is, I'm God. And in that community that's going to come from Ishmael, I create all people. And my purpose in redemption is going to include that whole people group, including all the Jewish line that's going to come through Isaac. And the great mystery that Paul said of the gospel was all ethnicities are redeemed unto God through the Son. That's the great miracle. And that's where you hear people speak about the commonality of Father Abraham. You see that. Because Christians, Jews, and Muslims do indeed have a common purpose that's found in the promise of God to Abraham. Do you understand this? And I spoke to this Muslim man, and he listened for 20 minutes. And then I remember saying, and I assumed he knew a lot of this. And I said, did you know this, Brother Wright? And he was looking at me. He said, no. He says, I've never heard that before. You see? And not too long after that is when we at the Foreign House in Kingsville got a memo that said, keep all your garage doors shut and locked. Maybe a year later. It wasn't too long after that. Probably less, because when the memo came out, I thought, I just talked to that Muslim man. So it said, because there was a memo that some possible radical Muslims are going to try to hijack fire trucks, okay? So, what's the parable? What's the verse I was going to read? It came from Psalms. I don't need to read it now. But it basically talked about the princes of Abraham. So, when I'm not in agreement with a lot of things Mr. Trump says, but in a politically heated environment, at this time, the things that he does say that many people are upset about, which I also am upset about some of the things he says, we need to be careful that if he's finally disciplined himself at least enough in that one speech that was made 2-3 days ago, and he said, I am not targeting banning all Muslims, I'm talking simply about parts of the world where radical Islam can be imported to us, where it's known threat. We want to get our immigration intact. And for the president and Hillary to respond to that and to say, Mr. Trump wants to ban an entire religion, that is not good, and it's not true. And if you were just, and you really cared about the gay community, you wouldn't sit there smugly interviewing a gay survivor from that terrible attack and never even bring up the fact that the Democratic candidate for this this cycle that we're in has taken more money from Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Never, ever has there been a candidate that has taken money like that. She tops the list. Books were written on it because it was illegal for her to be taking it because she was Secretary of State. But even if it was legal, these are countries that will execute you if you're gay. They will murder you. And for you to not even bring it up, media, and you claim that you're really a loving community, you don't know what justice is. And I know that President Obama was mad when he responded to the Trump speech. But what he's doing by saying, we can't ban a whole race, of course we can't. And the average Muslim, even in this country, who is not radicalized, is listening to you, Mr. President. And maybe they didn't listen to the Trump speech because they're upset with him. But they listened to what you said about his speech. And you gave the impression that he gave a big speech on banning all Muslims. That's the impression. You need to be careful that you don't give impressions like that. Because indeed it is wrong to incite violence, whether it's Trump doing it or Hillary or anybody else. And you do it, the media does it in a more subtle way, like I just explained. Right after this tragedy and all the things, and where does this hate come from? They showed a video of a Hispanic Christian preacher who I don't agree with his views. He's a fundamentalist, and he was preaching that homosexuality is a sin. And they tried to tie, in a subtle way, the Orlando massacre to the influence of a fundamentalist Christian preacher, who radical Muslims also want to kill, in that sense, Christian fundamentalist preachers. Because the radical believes not only the death of the homosexual, but also those who do not embrace their understanding of God. But the media almost portrayed it that was part of the cause. So even in why do they do all these things, John? Because they feel that if they think their side is right, their liberal views, and fine, I hold to some of them. And they think if we have to skew things, make them look a certain way, even for us to back what we feel is the best person that would do the best, what would you overlook the millions of dollars she takes directly from countries who kill homosexuals? When women are raped in those countries with Sharia law, they need multiple witnesses. Oftentimes that rapes are considered, you needed to do that service for that man. Where in things they can't drive, they're treated like living in like animals. And the cash that Hillary Clinton is getting from them, millions. You want to talk about $6 million of money that Trump raised for the vets, and you're going to screw them? They're all hypocrites. They're all hypocrites. I'm not giving you some conservative speech. I'm very liberal in many views. I'm just telling you what they're doing when they do that is they manipulate. And they do it at the detriment of trying to tamp down some of the hot rhetoric. Because in a subtle way, that in itself is inciting anger. The answer to the problem is how you saw me interact with that Muslim man. Okay? That's the answer. I believe the gospel is the answer. But that got me upset to see that. Okay? Oh, I forgot to give you my notes. Right after the waterfall video, okay? The one you saw before this, you're going to see it. All these are not even posted yet, but I got to remember the list. Right after that, there's a little house on the corner right in that area of Corpus Christi. And I've been looking at that house for years because it's a nice house, like right on the hill. I've done some videos right there, but I've never seen anybody there. So right after the video of the waterfall, I felt, oh, maybe I should go to the house. It's open. Somebody's working on it. I said, oh, this is great. You know, I've been looking sometimes. Maybe I'll move. Maybe I've always had that in my head. And there's a Mexican brother in there, all tattoos. See, these are my guys. and then another guy. I said, "Hey, brother, what's up?" I just walked in. "Oh, we're fixing it." I said, "Man, I've been wanting to buy this house for a while. Is it for sale?" And the Mexican guy with all tattoos says, "Oh, man, my brother just bought the house." And you could tell that he's kind of been on he's probably got a history. But these are my guys. 10 minutes, and because that's my calling, you understand? So I went in the house, checking it out. I said, "Brother, I do ministry, man." I said, "I work with a lot of guys on the streets. I work with a lot of gangs. I do prison ministry," because I could see he had something that maybe he would never bring up. So he's watching me, and then I'm talking just like a ministry day, really. Because after 20 minutes, I said, "Yeah, I told my guys once if we ever buy this place," the house we were in right then, I said, "if we ever buy it, we do fellowships out here." And I said, "Well, but his brother bought the house." I said, "Well, here's my ministry card. It's got my number. Tell your brother if maybe he doesn't want to keep it, here's the number." So I gave him the card and all. And then, after about 15 minutes and all, this is something he would have never said. And we're just talking. He said, "I just did 20 years in prison." And he said, "I just got out." And he looks to see, but he could already see that I was accepting in the sense that I said, "Oh, brother, that's good." I said, "Well, not good." I said, "But that's fine." I said, "Many of my brothers over the years, I used to have ministry in Bishop, Kingsville, were in that area there." And then I told him, I said, "Brother, if you want," you say, "you're talking to him." Yes, just like, it would have been just like any video you've ever seen with any of my friends. Okay? That's how it was after 20 minutes. I said, "I do videos. It's for that website. I just gave you the card." I said, "You want to give some testimony?" Now, I have no idea whether he's Christian or not, but 20 years in prison. He's got a story about God, I guarantee you. I guarantee you. And he almost wanted to do it. I said, "But brother, I upload these on the websites." I said, "So if you don't want everybody seeing you," he wanted to do it, but he was a little hesitant. I said, "No, that's all right. I would have just done a meeting right there, like any other meeting." I said, "If I see you out here sometimes, brother," I said, "I ride out that way." I said, "If I see you, I'll stop." And then I thought later, I looked at the house, and they do like it, but I want to have my nice prayer spot the same way. It's got to be kind of secluded in a way. And then I thought for a couple of years I prayed, I'd like to do meetings in this house, Lord, wanting to buy it. And then I thought, I almost did one. And if I just go back and see the brothers, we'll probably wind up doing a meeting. You might see it. You don't have to own everything. See, Abraham was on that journey. So at least I got that story. And we're going to end with that, all right? That's what I want you to see. I know people feel passionately about, I'm looking. Oh, I got to answer the question. Some of my friends saw the post, "Is John an undercover cop?" Now you're thinking, but the next video you made, which is already done, you didn't make it clear, John. And we got questions now. And we want you to resolve them. Well, the other guys used to ask me, let's see if this resolves it. The other guys used to ask me, they used to say, "John's in the mafia. He's Italian, he's in the mafia." And I've never claimed it. I never claimed it. So all I'm going to do is leave you with that. Hopefully that solves all the answers. God bless you guys.